On the morning of May 20th, 1999, a police car pulled up to a forgotten building in the tiny, quiet town of Snowtown, South Australia. Population, barely 400 people. The building was an old abandoned bank. It had been sitting empty for years. The windows were caked in layers of dust, the paint was peeling from the walls, and the air inside was cold, stale, and completely silent. From the outside, it looked like a place where time had simply stopped. Two officers stepped inside. Their boots kicked up small clouds of dust as they walked down the main hallway. They weren't expecting to find much. Maybe some old paperwork. Maybe evidence of break-ins. But as they walked deeper toward the back of the building, they reached a dark room. And standing right in front of them was a massive, solid steel vault door. Built decades ago to protect money and gold, this door was thick, heavy, and built to keep the outside world out. One of the officers stepped up, grabbed the heavy metal handle, and pulled. The door creaked open. Immediately, a stench hit them. It was thick, metallic, and nauseating. A smell so overpowering that both officers instantly pulled back. When they shined their flashlights into the pitch-black room, the beam cut through the heavy air and landed on 6 large, black plastic barrels sitting side by side on the concrete floor. The barrels were sealed shut. When forensic teams finally forced those lids open, they didn't find stolen money. They didn't find documents. Inside those 6 barrels were the butchered, decomposed remains of human beings. The silence in that room was absolute. Police realized in a single second that they weren't dealing with a simple missing persons case anymore. They were looking at the work of a systematic, cold-blooded predator. And the most horrifying part? The victims hadn't been killed here. They had been stored here. Which meant whoever did this had been operating right in the open for years without anyone noticing. To understand how 6 barrels ended up inside an abandoned bank vault, you have to go back several years to a working-class suburb in Adelaide. If you lived on that street in the mid-1990s, you would have known a man who seemed completely ordinary. He wasn't a recluse. He didn't hide in the shadows. He was charismatic. He was confident. He was the kind of guy who would wave at you across the lawn, strike up a conversation at the local shop, and offer to fix your car if you were having trouble. His name was John Bunting. To the people living around him, John Bunting was just a helpful, friendly neighbor. But Bunting had a specific talent. He knew how to read people. He actively looked for people who were isolated, people who were struggling with depression, addiction, or financial trouble, people who felt like society had cast them aside and who were desperately searching for acceptance. When he found them, he didn't intimidate them. He welcomed them. He invited them over, cooked meals for them, sat with them for hours, and listened to their problems. He made them feel heard. He made them feel like they finally belonged to a family. Slowly, Bunting built a tight-knit inner circle. Among them was a young man named Robert Wagner, and later a local named Mark Hayden. They looked up to Bunting. They hung on his every word. But once he had their trust, the atmosphere inside those quiet suburban houses began to change. In late-night conversations over drinks, Bunting started introducing dark, disturbing ideas. He began talking about justice. He convinced his small group that the legal system was failing, that the world was full of worthless people, and that somebody needed to clean up the streets. Bunting wasn't just complaining, he was conditioning them. Step by step, conversation by conversation, he reshaped their moral compass until they believed his every word. He made them feel like they weren't committing crimes. They were part of a secret crusade. And once that mindset was locked in, the disappearances began. It started in 1995 with a man named Ray Davies. Ray was a vulnerable man who lived nearby. He had personal struggles and kept mostly to himself. One afternoon, Ray was simply gone. No sign of a struggle, no broken windows, no dramatic crime scene. In a quiet town, when a quiet person disappears, people assume they just packed up and left, maybe to start over somewhere else. And that was precisely what Bunting and his group relied on. They weren't choosing random victims. They were meticulously selecting people who didn't have strong support systems. People whose absence wouldn't immediately trigger massive search parties or national news headlines. They chose people they believed the world would forget. After Ray, another person vanished. Then another. Inside the house, the group's methodology became terrifyingly cold. They would invite the victim over under the guise of friendship or offering help. The victim would walk through the front door, believing they were among people who cared about them. Once inside, the trap snapped shut. The victims were bound, tortured, and forced to record audio messages or write letters to their families, giving fake excuses like, "I'm moving away," or "Don't look for me." This allowed Bunting to cover his tracks before the body was even hidden. And after the crime was committed, the killers didn't panic. They didn't flee the city. They went back to their normal routines. They walked the same streets. They bought groceries at the same corner store. They talked to the victims' families with a sympathetic smile, asking if there was any news about their missing loved one. They lived completely normal lives while keeping human remains hidden in plastic barrels in their own sheds and garages. With every disappearance that went unnoticed, their feeling of invincibility grew. By late 1998, the body count was rising, but so was Bunting's greed and carelessness. When a young man named Troy Yude disappeared, his family didn't buy the excuses. They started asking hard questions immediately, pushing local police to investigate further. At the same time, detectives noticed a financial anomaly. Several missing people were still somehow collecting government assistance checks. Even stranger, those checks were being cashed at the exact same local bank branches in Adelaide. Police launched a secret task force. They began cross-referencing bank records, phone logs, and missing person reports. And every single trail, every single document, kept leading back to the exact same inner circle. The same group of friends, the same house. Bunting was smart. He felt the air changing. He noticed strange cars parked down the street. He realized the police were getting dangerously close. They needed to move the evidence somewhere completely untraceable. In early 1999, Bunting and his accomplices loaded 6 heavy, sealed plastic barrels into the back of a vehicle. They drove out of Adelaide, heading north into the rural countryside, until they reached the quiet, sleepy town of Snowtown. There, they found the old abandoned bank building. It was for sale or rent, completely unmonitored. They leased the property under a false pretext, carried the heavy barrels inside, placed them neatly in the reinforced steel vault, locked the massive door, and walked away. They truly believed that behind those thick steel walls, buried in a town nobody paid attention to, their secret was safe forever. They were wrong. Detectives tracking the group's movements finally traced a vehicle lease and a key transaction straight to Snowtown. When the police finally unlocked that bank vault on May 20th, 1999, the nightmare was exposed to the entire world. John Bunting, Robert Wagner, and Mark Hayden were arrested shortly after. The investigation that followed was one of the largest and most complex in Australian history. Detectives uncovered evidence linking the group to a total of 11 horrific murders. During the trial, the public was forced to confront the chilling reality of what had been happening for years behind closed doors in their own neighborhoods. Bunting showed zero remorse. He sat in the courtroom emotionless, still convinced in his twisted mind that he had done nothing wrong. In the end, John Bunting and Robert Wagner were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring they would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Decades later, the Snowtown murders remain one of the most haunting criminal cases in history. The old bank building became a symbol of a nightmare that a small, peaceful town never asked for. It's easy to think of monsters as creatures hiding in dark alleys or far away in the woods. But the story of Snowtown leaves us with a much more unsettling truth. The most dangerous monsters don't look frightening. They walk among us. They smile at us in the morning. They offer a helping hand when we're down. They build trust until you lower your guard. And when that bank vault door was opened in 1999, it didn't just reveal a crime scene. It revealed how easily horror can hide behind an ordinary face, right in front of everyone, just waiting for someone to finally look closer.